Hey, welcome back. This is Asfar Basunia and I'm a final year medical student who just matched at the University of Pennsylvania for diagnostic radiology. In this video, I'm going to share with you my insights on pre and post interview communication, which includes letters of interest, thank you notes, and the letter of intent. Two important points about these pre and post interview communications are: number one, they are entirely optional and may not meaningfully affect your chances of either obtaining an interview or your position in the rank list. The contents of your ARIS application and your interview performance may be far more significant in that regard. Number two, there are no official guidelines from the AAMC or individual residency programs. I structured my communications based on the etiquettes published in the AMSER guide. Let's start with the letter of interest. A letter of interest is sent to a residency program with the hopes of obtaining an interview. How early you send your letter of interest will depend on your personal preference. However, sending a letter of interest after all interview slots are filled or all interview days are at peak capacity may not bear any results. The latest I would personally recommend sending a letter of interest would be soon after the first wave of interview invitations are sent out. You can find out when interviews are sent out from the Radiology Applicants Discord channel or the Reddit spreadsheet. After sending a letter of interest, do not expect a response. I personally sent out 7 letters of interest and only one program director responded, noting that all interview slots were unfortunately filled. Now, I want to mention that I received interviews at 4 out of the top 7 programs in my rank list after sending a letter of interest. 3 of those interviews were in the program's second or third interview waves, and one of them was from a cancellation late in the interview season. Because I did not receive a direct email response to my letter of interest from any of those 4 programs, it is impossible to tell whether my letter of interest actually resulted in those interviews. Regardless, here's how I structured my letter of interest in 2 paragraphs. I started the first paragraph with a short introductory sentence like, I am a student at X medical school and I would like to reiterate my interest in a residency program and hope that you consider me for an interview. I followed that with 1 sentence to describe the program's academic strengths, 1 sentence to highlight specific research opportunities I'm interested in, 1 sentence or other opportunities I'm excited to pursue, such as medical education and rad aid. Finally, I used the last sentence of the paragraph to convey my excitement about the program's location or city. If your couple's matching, you can mention it here as well, especially if your other half already has an interview at the program's institution. In the second paragraph, I briefly highlighted my academic as well as my non-academic accomplishments. So for instance, I started the paragraph mentioning that I've done well academically in medical school, I was part of AOA, number of clinical honors I received in rotations, my Step 1 score as well as my Step 2 CK score. On the research side, I mentioned that I have extensive experience in data science and have co-authored X number of PubMed indexed publications and Y number of abstracts or posters, making special note of any radiology specific research work. For notable extracurricular activities, I mentioned that I co-founded a refugee wellness group in my medical school that connected students with newly arrived refugees and promoted preventative medicine. In the email signature, I always included my ARIS specific email and my AAMC ID. I addressed my letters of interest to the program director and CC'd the program coordinator. Moving right along to thank you notes. Thank you notes should be ideally sent within 24 hours after an interview when your profile and your interactions with the interviewer are fresh in their mind. Thus, I strongly recommend emailing over snail mailing your thank you letters. It ensures that your interviewers get the letters on time and it saves you the extra cost and hassle. Unlike my letters of interest, I received far more positive responses to my thank you letters. Whether you choose to send your thank you letters to the program director only or to all your interviewers is a matter of personal preference. Now, I believe that effective thank you letters should capture 2 points. Number 1, why you're excited about a particular program, and number 2, succinctly recall specific conversations or interactions you had with the interviewer. Thus, similar to my letters of interest, I chose to structure my thank you letters into 2 paragraphs. In the first paragraph, I started my email thanking the faculty for giving me an opportunity to interview at their wonderful program. Then, I briefly underlined what I'm seeking from a residency program and how the interviewer's program exceeded my expectations. If I was writing to multiple interviewers at the same institution, this paragraph remained unchanged. In the second paragraph, I highlighted specific and unique discussions or interactions during my interview. These often came straight from the opinion-based questions I asked during my interview, such as in their mind, what differentiated a good from a great resident, or strategies for maximizing my preliminary year. Lastly, let's talk about the letter of intent. The primary purpose of the letter of intent is to let a program know that you're ranking them number 1. While acceptable in other specialties, do not send messages like, I'm ranking your program highly, or I'm ranking you in my top 3 or top 5. If a program is not your number 1, do not send them a letter of intent. Likewise, it is very, very important to send the letter of intent only to one program. Radiology is a small world, and it is not worth it to potentially get blacklisted for fellowships or at future job opportunities by duping programs and sending letters of intent to multiple institutions. The timing of the letter of intent is also important. Ideally, you want to get the letter of intent in just prior to the program's rank list meeting. Since both the timing as well as the method of crafting a rank list varies from program to program, I personally recommend sending the letter of intent in soon after a program's last day of interviews to be on the safe side. Unlike the 2-paragraph structure of my letters of interest or thank you notes, I believe that an effective letter of intent should be short and sweet and can be accomplished in 3 sentences. The first sentence should state that you've compiled your rank list and you've ranked the program number 1. Your second and your third sentence should briefly discuss your reasons for doing so. Any geographic ties or couples matching considerations should also be mentioned. The subject line of your letter of intent is also important, as you want to get the message across to the program director or the associate program director even if they don't open the body of your email. Thus, I would title the email with something like Letter of Intent, Ranking Your Program Number 1. Before I end the video, I want to briefly discuss sending programs updates to your CV. Since there could be several months between the submission of your ARAS application and your interview date, you may have added several awards or publications to your CV. AMSER has a guide for this. However, I recommend incorporating these updates into letters of interest or thank you notes to minimize the extra communication between you and the program director or the program coordinator. Remember that they are very, very busy at this time, and communicating too frequently may draw their annoyance or their ire. Well, that's it for today's video, and I hope that you found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Stay well and see you next time.